my brother retired as a canine officer, he went into private security for a guy who's basically a billionaire. And before he retired, he was also part of the canine SWAT team. So when I saw the news and I saw this woman fumbling to put her gun away after Trump was shot at, and they took him off the stage and they were going to put him back into the car to whisk him off to the hospital, I watched what I thought was a woman who didn't have the wherewithal to be on this Secret Service team because she couldn't even effectively put her gun away in a proficient manner for a Secret Service agent. So I called my brother up and he explained to me quite a lot about what goes on behind the scenes. And he said, yeah, she obviously doesn't have enough experience with the gun. But then it got me thinking that there's more to the story than her lack of experience, because I want to bring in the fact that she's female. And I'm here to say that females like her don't belong on the Secret Service team. For Trump, he's 6'2" to 6'3". We all know that the news was talking about the fact that she was too short. I'm not here to talk about her being short. That is a physical limitation that is plain and simple. That was mistake number one, right? Because she's too short to get in front of a bullet. But here's the problem. We're pointing out that she tried to put this gun away here, and I think, took several attempts to try to get it in there. She's wasting valuable time when we have a possible shooter that could have been there to shoot at the past president one more time. Now, here's the way it should have gone. When it comes to someone protecting you, you don't want them overweight, because here's her problem. You can tell if we just compare these two women, she's not overweight. But can you agree that she is by looking at this photo? And here's what I'm pointing out is her neck. You see her neck here compared to this girl's neck? She's got a well-defined neck. This girl here, more than likely, has what condition if you have a thick neck?
Sleep apnea?
Yes, sleep apnea. When you have sleep apnea, that means she doesn't get a good night's rest. Are you going to be alert the next day if you don't get a good night's rest? Are you going to be on your toes the next day if you don't have a good night's rest? No. Here's another problem. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe if I zoom in, can you guys see her belly right here? Do you guys see the demarcation here? I thought if she's not fat, she's pregnant. But how many of us think that they'll allow a pregnant woman to be on the Secret Service team? So I'm going to make the assumption that she's just overweight. So if she's overweight and she has sleep apnea, we've got some issues with that. Okay, so first of all, when you have sleep apnea, if she doesn't have a device that she's sleeping with, because either she hasn't been diagnosed or maybe she couldn't get used to the device, then she's going to suffer the consequences of sleep apnea, which are fatigue, poor concentration, memory issues, getting tired after a meal, slower reaction time, and being easily irritated. Does anyone know what time of day the shooting happened? It was 6:11 p.m. I wonder if she had a meal before the event because she was going to be working that night. If she has sleep apnea and she had a meal, guess what that made her? Tired after a meal. Do you want somebody who's tired after a meal protecting you and your life and limb? Poor quality sleep, if it's not handled, eventually will lead to what we all know has happened to a lot of us. High blood pressure, high blood sugar, frequent urination need, anxiety, depression, low testosterone, heart disease, irregular heartbeats, heart attack. So this is stuff that happens when we have poor sleep for decades. She's young. She may not be at this point where she has any of these diagnosed health problems. But let's go on to what this happens to do. We said here, low testosterone. So this is where my talk comes in on why you men are superior to us women when it comes to the Secret Service. If I were Trump, I would only have men protecting me, because here's where male superiority comes into play. I'll die on this hill. that men are superior to women because you guys have testosterone. And here's why testosterone makes you guys superior. Testosterone is the hormone that runs through my body as well as yours, but it runs through differently in me. So let me explain this. Testosterone, whether you're male or female, is going to be responsible for you to think more clearly, to think more quickly, to move more efficiently, to have increased muscle strength, and to have the increased ability to handle stress. These are all testosterone related hormonal advantages. And then what's the last one? Increased libido. You guys know. So this is proof to you guys that we women have testosterone and you men, but we run on a different schedule. You men are superior because you have more testosterone. Can you guys agree you have more testosterone than a woman? That's what makes your voice deeper. That's what makes you stronger. That's what makes you guys more of a ability to grow big biceps compared to us women. If we worked out in the gym, we're better at building better thigh muscles and butt because our weight is distributed differently for birthing children. So this is not about bashing women. Women are amazing because what do we women do? We can make another human being in our body. But guess what? We can only do that 5 days out of the month. That's when testosterone shows up for us women. 5 days out of every month, we have the ability to create a human being in our body. The other 25 days, we don't. So testosterone only flows through a woman's body for 5 days. How often do you think you guys get testosterone? You guys get it every 15 minutes. Do you think that makes you guys superior over us when it comes to all of these attributes? Strength, agility, dealing with stress, thinking on your feet. This is why men are in positions of security and protecting life and limb of important people and important things. This is where I will go into it about the other part. This is why men think about sex all the time, because if you have testosterone flowing through your body every 15 minutes, that increases your libido. If you want to have sex with a female, you got to find out when her schedule is, if she's still menstruating. If she's not, that's a whole nother topic for another day. But if a woman is in your life and she still has a period, you count day 1 as the beginning of her cycle. I forgot to mention that day 1 is the day she starts to bleed. That's where you start counting from. She's going to want to have sex at day 10 to day 15. There's your 5 days. Day 10 to day 15 is when she will say yes to sex because her body wants it, because she has an increased rise in testosterone, which is what's going to help that baby to be conceived. That's the way the human body works. Now, granted, yes, there are women who are on the pill, they're on these hormones, that changes things, is a whole nother topic. But that's the way the human body works for our species to survive and continue. So here's where we end up with this problem. You guys remember the Uvalde school shooting where we lost 7 children, of whether they were the police or the SWAT team or the Border Patrol. The average age of the men that went to Uvalde were probably in their 30s. Here's a picture of when the kids were running out of the school. What I see when I look at this is, if you go through and look through the photos, you will see a lot of young men who are overweight, more so than 30, 40 years ago when you would look at photos of something like this. Or if you go to a photo of the beach in 1970 and look at the general population of how much more people were overweight compared to back then, there's a huge difference. So why I bring this up is that a lot of these servicemen or police officers or Border Patrol agents or security guards, they were more than likely born in 1990s. And why does that make a difference? Because they were exposed to much more highly processed and palatable foods that they got addicted to. Those highly processed foods that they got addicted to created a problem for their bodies. Maybe they haven't been diagnosed with high blood pressure yet, or type 2 diabetes, or any of the diseases that we get when we get 50 and older, but they have the repercussions of, guess what? Low testosterone levels at a young age when they should have high amounts of testosterone, which would have made it available for one of those guys to say, it's bullshit, we're sitting out here waiting 80 minutes before we go in there. You would have had probably 1/3 of the people on that saying, let's ram into that room and get that shooter. We'll do whatever it takes to save those children. Because the testosterone running through these young men's bodies, I will guarantee you, is not the level of testosterone that we had running through your bodies when you were in your 30s. And why? Because these young generation service people come from, unfortunately, being born in 1990, which is 20 years after 1970, when all of the stupidity of the American Dietary Association recommended that we shouldn't be eating animal fat, that we should be having margarine instead of butter, that we should stop eating the yolks of eggs and we should eat egg white omelets, and that we needed to be pumping ourselves full of powdered proteins, and, you know, even to the point of what we found in the 80s, drinking smoothies. You know, all of the BS that has come about has created what we live in today, of a society of men who have less testosterone than they should have. I can guarantee that right now, that the younger generation is having a lot less sex because they don't have the testosterone levels that you had when you run. How old were you in 1970?
22.
22.
Okay, at 22 years of age, any normal, healthy 22-year-old should have been thinking about sex all the time.
He was.
I can tell you right now, with all honesty, that's exactly what I'm 60 years old. That's exactly what I expected any normal human male to be thinking of. If they weren't thinking of it, then I knew that there was a problem. Here's the bottom line. In the 1990s, these kids had no fighting chance. They grew up on Similac, which is a processed beverage for the children, so their mothers didn't bother doing a breastfed child because they went to work in the 90s. Whereas we grew up, I know I did, my mom breastfed me. These kids didn't have a fighting chance when they were first born, and then they come into this society where everything comes in a convenient processed package. I remember TV dinners. How many of you guys remember the foil TV dinners, right? Back then, my mom would have thought that was bad food, but today that's even way better than what kids have as an option today. So here we are bringing these kids up in a society where they don't know what real food is. A lot of these young men grew up probably never knowing what real butter was. Therein lies where we have what society is facing now with at Uvalde, and not taking charge of the situation, not being afraid. I felt there were too many people, too many men there that were afraid. And I'm going to add one more layer that my brother brought up. He said that when he always feared when he saw a female team member show up on a detail, he has to fight his desire to save the woman. He says, we men are just wired that way. When they're in a situation and there's a female cop around them, they're going to try to save her at their expense. And if that was a male cop with them, it would have been two male cops dealing with the situation. But he knew as soon as he saw a female show up, he said, okay, I'm the one that's going to have to risk my life for her, because that's how he's built. Because why? He's a normal breathing male with testosterone running through his veins. Now, if he were a man who didn't have that testosterone running through his veins, as soon as something bad happens, what's he going to do? Well, I hope she figures out how to get out of here because I'm running for my life. That's the way a person without enough testosterone would react. And that's why we ended up with Uvalde, 7 kids dead. And that's a sad state of affairs. So this is just what I wanted to bring up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Or actually, I do have one more thing. Do you guys remember that one person in this hallway used the sanitizer during the 80 minutes? During the 80 minutes that this shooter was killing the kids and they were not busting into the room, there's an individual on this team that goes up to the disinfectant and puts that on his hands. That was a reaction of somebody who feels like they're at a loss. Because who needs hand sanitizer during an 80-minute standoff with a shooter killing children? It makes no sense, but it goes to show you where his mind was. His mind thought, well, I'm not going to go in and do something, so let me do something productive. And by the way, that's the hand sanitizer right there. That just goes to show you the problems that we face as a society. If you go back and look at the footage of when Ronald Reagan got shot, you look at how those men reacted, you will see a whole different scenario. And one of the things that you're going to notice, which my brother pointed out to me, is that the men, when they were protecting Ronald Reagan, were not facing into Ronald Reagan. They were facing out. They were still going to take the bullet, but they were facing out for further threats. We can wrap this up by going back to what I always tell you. Hormones run the show, you don't. The chubby woman's hormones, maybe she wasn't on her testosterone one of the 5 days. And if she was on one of the 5 days that she had testosterone, she probably didn't have enough of it made because she's overweight. She probably has PCOS, which was it's a condition that women who are not yet diabetic end up having. But again, doctors don't diagnose PCOS. It just turns out when they can't have a baby, and then they say, well, let's do IVF. They don't need in vitro fertilization. What they need to do is balance their hormones. You balance your hormones, things are good. And this goes back to you guys when someone tells you, well, you don't have testosterone because you're old. No, you have less testosterone because you're older, but you do have testosterone. And you can have a heightened level of it even in your 70s and 80s. And right now, you guys can actually beat guys that are in their 20s and 30s because they're eating such bad food. I think that there's a problem now with Medicare because they're having less babies. If they're having less sex, they're having less babies, less people to pay into the pool for Medicare. So you guys see the repercussions financially down the road. And I believe that there's a country, I don't know if it's China, that's paying people to have children.
China, yeah.
Yeah, is that right?
They for so many years they didn't want to have more than one child. Now they've run out of that because they don't have enough men now, and they're paying the women to have more babies.
Again, with you guys going through this course, you're learning how to balance your hormones so that you can reverse disease, but also more importantly, balancing the hormones also helps with anxiety, also helps with critical situations. And here's another thing. Here's something I didn't think of before to say, but let's just say Armageddon breaks out. How many of us can easily say, hey, we're good for 3 days. We don't need to eat.
Really?
But think of all the sugar burners who go, we need to eat. We're going to die if we don't eat. Well, guess who's going to be around? Those of us that have the ability to say, as long as we have water, we're good. Imagine you guys with the extra lunch that we call around your belly. That is your saving grace. We'll end on that note. And this is what's good, guys. As long as you are not a sugar burner, you will survive to not only protect yourself and your family, but probably your neighbors. And how many of you know neighbors who require the sleep apnea machine? If they don't have electricity, how are they going to run their sleep apnea devices? After a few weeks of not having electricity, something's going to go wrong for them. And again, this is Mother Nature's way of survival of the fittest. Survival of the human species has to happen. And certain things like this push us into that. If you want to be resilient, no matter what comes our way in this world, get rid of that belly fat and reverse disease, then click the link below this video. It's my calendar. You know that's where you can put yourself on there and talk directly with me about what's going on in your situation. Look forward to talking to you on the other side.